Hello there, it is SharRon, the CEO and founder of the Jamison Group, and I hope everybody is having a great Saturday, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I preached a sermon called Watch Your Words, and I had been asked to share some of the tips on Facebook, but I kept forgetting. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for joining me. So today I wanted to share those 5 tips that I shared during my sermon a couple of weeks ago that I entitled Watch Your Words. And hey, Lori. And so I hope you have a pencil and paper. You see, I'm old-fashioned, showing my age, because I think these 5 tips will not only help you look at your life differently, it will help you be in relationship with people from a more holistic, more honest perspective. So just wanted to share. And so let's get started. The first tip that I shared in my sermon, hey Lori, was that we have to be careful because we all have limited vision. We all have limited vision. And what I shared in my sermon is that when I was a teenager, me and my friends, we went to this restaurant right after church, and we saw this woman in the back and she was moving her hands. And so we looked at her because we thought she was kind of being cray-cray. And so we made all these judgments about this woman. We created this whole scenario that she was back there, talking about her, arguing with her boyfriend. We talked about the lady like a dog. I'm almost embarrassed to even admit it. I was a teenager. We talked about this lady like a dog. And so we thought she was back there arguing, but then we went to the bathroom and we realized that she was back there, not just waving her hands, hey Trina, but she was back there using her hands for sign language to speak to and to teach the Bible to people who are hearing impaired. So here we are, we can't really see. We saw her moving her hands and we thought she was acting crazy, and we made so many bad judgments, but because we only saw her waving her hands. But when we went back, we realized that she was not just waving her hands, that she was using her hands to speak to people who are often overlooked. Hey, Stephen. And it goes to show that we had limited vision. So as a result, we had limited understanding. Now, there are a lot of different other ways that you can have limited vision. We had limited vision because we couldn't see, right? But you can have limited vision, one, when you don't understand a situation. We have limited vision when we don't have the expertise or the experience to really understand what we're looking at. So it doesn't matter if the situation is this big, but we only have this much information. Because we have limited vision, we're always going to make bad decisions. So I really talked about that we can have limited vision because something's outside of our experience, based on our culture, our clan, our religion, or maybe our education. We might have limited vision because we are relying on he said, that she said, that I said. And research shows that every time a person shares information, it loses its accuracy. So by the time it gets to you, it might not have no nuggets of truth in it. So we got to be careful to understand we have limited vision because sometimes the information that we have is limited in its scope. The third reason why we have to understand we have limited vision is when we are in pain. Because nothing limits your vision more than pain, because you can't see clearly when you're hurting. My elders used to say that pain was just like liquor, because liquor and pain both make you drunk. And I never forgot that, because just like when we are drunk with liquor we can't see, it's the same as when we are drunk with pain that we can't see. And so we have to remember that if we are in pain, we are not going to see everything that we need to see, because our vision is going to be limited. And when we have limited vision, we have limited understanding. So I really talked about that at church, because many times we judge things based on limited vision. We have to remember that we only see in part. We never see in total. We see in part. Hey, CC. And the part that we see is usually the part that we want to see to confirm our assumptions. Or the part that we see in someone else's life is the part that we want to see to reinforce our expectations. So we have to remember that we only see in part. And when we see in part, that we are not seeing the whole thing, which reminds us that we should not make deep decisions based on drive-by data. drive-by data. And drive-by data is when we think we see and we think we know, but we only know in part. Drive-by data. So that's why we have to be really clear, because just like you can't drive by someone's house and know what's going on in their relationship or in their home, you can't drive by a business and know what's going on in the business. You can't drive by a person's life and think you know what's going on, because you have a limited vision. Like me and my friends, we couldn't see what was happening in the back of the room because we have a limited vision. So we have to remember that there are always aspects of something that we don't see. We have limited vision. That means we have limited understanding. And remember, we always see in part. Drive-by data is not the truth. Remember, fragments of facts is not the facts, and pieces of information is not proof. So we got to be careful that we don't judge people based on limited data, because not only do we injure them, but we injure ourselves. We all have limited vision. So we got to remember that we see in part, and we are inclined and tempted to see the part that we want to see. So that's the first part I mentioned in my sermon. The second part I mentioned in my sermon is that there is a difference between information and interpretation. There is a difference between information and interpretation. Now, why is that important? Here, me and my friends, again, we were teenagers, so please forgive us. We saw this lady moving her hands, right? And we said some very low down, degrading things about this lady. Because now, the part that we saw is that we saw her moving her hands. We got that part right. Hey, Allison. But the part we did not have is the right interpretation, because we didn't know what sign language looked like. So we had information. We saw her moving her hands. We had that part, but we failed to have the correct interpretation. Now, why is that important? In our lives, we are tempted to believe that just because we see a thing, we know what the thing is. Just because we have a thing, we know how to use a thing. Hey, Tammy, but that's not always true. We can have knowledge, we can have data, we can have information, but still not have a clue. Because if we have information and we don't have the right interpretation, we're still not informed. Now, why is that important? Hey, Tammy, it's more important because especially in this life, in this time of photoshopping and changing information with all technology, we can see two people in a picture and we can create a whole scenario and a whole narrative about what's happening and be totally wrong, right? Because we have information, we see them on a picture, but we don't know what that means. So we got to be careful that we don't see a thing and think we know a thing, because we don't. And when we speak on something or judge something because we have information and not revelation, we make the mistake of hurting people and making harsh judgments based on limited data. So that's why it's important to understand that information is not interpretation. And since we don't have the right interpretation, we need to stay out of people's situation. Because when we put our nose in their situation, we cause additional complication. So that's why we got to stay in our lane. And we got to make sure and remind ourselves that, again, we have limited vision. One, we see in part. And that we don't have clear interpretation, because a rumor is not revelation. A rumor is speculation. So we got to make sure that we honor people and honor ourselves by not making assumptions based on our myopic, silo, parochial, narrow-minded interpretation. Why? Because we see in part. So they always go together. So I want us to make sure, don't interpret something. You can see it but not know what you're looking at. You can know it, but not know what you understand it. You can have it, but not know what to do with it. And we know that because a lot of people are in relationships with other people and don't know how to have a relationship. I will raise my hand for that, right? So I want us to make sure we understand that interpretation and information are not the same thing. Insight is not given. Insight is something that you have to reflect on. So that's the thing. The third thing I talked about is that we have to be careful that we don't rashly judge people. Me and my friends, and again at this restaurant, hey Paulette, we were so mean because this lady had on a bad wig, we thought she was a bad person. And so we created this whole scenario. Now you might say, SharRon, hey Gail, you might say, oh, I'm not like that. But really, we have to be careful, because what the truth is that we take people and we reduce people down to stereotypes. We take people that we don't even know, and just by looking at their packaging, their outside, we are tempted to minimize them to images. We are tempted to take their whole personhood and push it down based on our level of understanding. And we got to be careful, because all of us, it's not that we mean, but we all have stories and stereotypes that we judge people by. And most of the stereotypes are wrong. So we got to be cautious. We got to be prayerful. We got to be careful that we don't judge people based on how they look and who they love and what they work, where they work in their faith, because we know nothing about them. And so when we make quick judgments about people, what we do is that we diminish them, reduce them, we downgrade them to stereotypes and norms that totally do not honor who they are. And then when we reduce people, guess what? Then we objectify them. Instead of calling them by their names, call them Karen and Joe and Trina and Paulette, we call them we objectify them and call them slaves and savages and liars and whores. At any time in history, hey Derry, when we have objectified people, we have mistreated them. I want you to think about it. Every atrocity, every genocide, every human rights violation is because we took a person and we objectified them down to a label. We call them cockroaches, or savages, or slaves, or whores, or immigrants. Anytime we take people and just downsize them and diminish them and dilute their divinity and their humanity to something that's a label, we do that. And when we objectify people, we act as if we have a license to treat them in inhumane ways, or we act as we treat people in ways that don't honor their divinity nor humanity. Yes, Paulette, we can't judge a book by its cover, and we do that all the time. So what is a remedy for that? What is a remedy when we are tempted to judge people? People who have worked with me in my company know we have a saying: you get close, you get curious, you get clear. Get close, get curious, get clear. That means that you got to get close enough to the situation, get close enough to the person so you can honor them and learn about them. Because if you judge people by a packaging, not only you do them injustice, you do yourself an injustice. Because we see people based on how we see ourselves. So if we see people negatively, it's really a reflection of how we see ourselves. So we got to make sure that we give people the ability to allow them to be people and to walk in their divinity and humanity and see all the wonderful people and all the wonderful traits, just not the bad ones. Because guess what? We have bad ones too. Hey, Yvonne. So that was the fourth thing. The fourth thing I talked about is that we got to be careful that before we judge someone, we got to make sure our life can withstand the same level of scrutiny. I'm going to say that again. Before we judge someone else, we got to be careful, hey Tella, that our lives can withstand the same level of scrutiny. Why is that important? Because honestly, as human beings, we are very hypocritical. We want to accuse someone else, but we want to excuse ourselves. You know, we want to point out somebody else's flaws, but we won't take the log out of our own eyes. And we got to be careful, because we tend to be hypocrites, right? So and even though we don't say that we do, we really judge people for the same thing we do. Hey Gail, hey Cynthia, but we just put a nice label on it. We'll say, oh, somebody is picky, but I'm just realistic. Or we'll say, she's stingy as crap, but I'm just frugal. Or we'll say, she's so critical, I'm just detail oriented. Or we say that somebody's just lazy, well, I am just trying to find my way. We are quick to say that somebody is a whore, but I am just sexually free. Or we say somebody's a liar. Oh, I'm like Donald Trump. I like alternative facts, right? We got to be careful because we will crucify someone and sanitize our truth. We will see someone doing the same thing and we will judge them, but we will Christianize or sanitize or deodorize our stuff. We're doing the same thing, but we will judge them but excuse ourselves. And so we are tempted to be hypocrites, and we are tempted to always want to expose someone else's dirty laundry because we think that we are better. We think that we are doing something. But here's the truth. The same measure that you judge someone else, it will be the same measure that somebody judges you. Hey, Cynthia. Hey, Shayla. So we got to be careful because what comes around goes around. What you reap is what you sow. And so we got to be so careful that we don't just, celebrate hypocrisy and crucify honesty. If we're going to be clear, if we're going to be fair, don't judge someone when we're doing the same thing. So we got to be careful. We got to be careful. If our lives cannot withstand the same scrutiny, shut our mouths. Shut our mouths, because all of us have fallen short. And so I think we got to be careful because I think, excuse me, my nose is running, that we always are so quick to judge someone else when we're doing the exact same thing. We're just sanitizing it and putting on a different label on it, so we can feel good about ourselves and judge the other person. Remember, the same mercy that you need is the same level of mercy that you need to extend. Yes. So I think that is really, really important. Hey, Valerie. And the last thing I talked about in my sermon is the power of our words, because our words create reality. Reality does not create the words. And so we got to be so mindful that our words can be either bullets or blessings. Right? Our words are bullets or blessings. Our words can be used to build people and liberate people and love people, but our words can be bullets and maim people and harm people and discourage people, because our mouths are powerful, our words are powerful, and the tongue is hard to tame. The Bible says that, but I know everybody might not have the same faith tradition. So we got to be careful about our words. So those are the 5 things. Yes, Trina, be slow to speak. But that doesn't always pay off. But even if we have to say a thing, there's a way to do a thing, because it's always important to say what we need to say diplomatically, because we don't have to be degrading to be diplomatic. We can say our truth. And so we got to make sure that there's a difference between using our words for bullets, to maim people, harm people, discourage people, disempower people, to degrade people, to demean people, to devalue people, or we can use them to bless and to uplift people, because people don't respond to negativity anyway. People respond to encouragement. They respond to affirmation. So those are the 5 things I talked about. I'll go over them very quickly. Again, 1, make sure before you judge, always remember that we all have limited vision. We have limited vision. We only see in part, and we are tempted to see the part that we want to see. We are tempted to see only the part that reinforces what we know. Remember, we all have limited vision because we can't see everything. We have limited vision because of pain. We have limited vision because he said, that she said, that I said. So we know that every time information is passed on, it loses its accuracy. And remember that you can't make good decisions with drive-by data. And every time we have drive-by data, that's when we just take what we see without looking deeply. Remember, there's always a story beyond what you know. And so we got to make sure that we understand that we have limited vision, so we don't maim people with our mouths. We don't cripple people with our comments, because we only see in part. It's always remember that we don't bring our truth down to our level of understanding. Here's the truth. You have to make sure you learn to bring your understanding up to the truth. You don't bring truth down to your reality because that's all you understand. Truth should never be diminished based on your ability to understand. Truth should be challenged and should be reflected upon to find the truth. Second thing, remember, information and inspiration are not the same thing. You can have all the data, all the knowledge, all the theory, and still not have a clue. Remember, they're different. Only God gives revelation. Only inspiration is something that comes after reflection. And speculation, rumor, and revelation are not the same thing. Okay. Third thing, make sure before we talk about someone else, we make sure our own lives can withstand a close inspection. Because if we cannot withstand the same level of scrutiny, we shouldn't say anything, right? And if we say something, we have to say it in privacy, because you give public praise, but you give private reprimand. And the problem is we get in our feelings and we want to put somebody on blast. But really, putting somebody on blast says more about you than it says about them. It really says that you're impulsive and you don't have you lack control, or it says that you don't have the ability to speak in a way that's still loving, because you give correction in the spirit of love. So that's different. And then the fourth thing, make sure that we don't make judgments based on somebody's how they look, because you can't judge a book by its cover. And just because the content does not, the packaging does not give you any clue about the content, because you can see a person can be one way on the outside and be a totally different person on the inside. And also watch our words. Our words can be bullets or blessings. So that's what I preached about. So I hope that those 5 lessons resonate with you, because at the end of the day, it's important to be our best selves. And at the end of the day, to understand that we are all a work in process. We all are under construction. We're all going to get it right, and sometimes we're going to get it wrong. And when, hey, Tiffany, but when we when we extend mercy and when we extend grace, that's the same grace and the same mercy that we can hope to give. Because when we judge people without information, first we shouldn't be judging anyway. But when we make decisions with limited information, and when we make decisions on third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand information, when we diminish people to stereotypes, or we diminish people to caricatures, or we dilute people to an image, we fail to honor their humanity. But most of all, we fail to honor ourselves. So I hope that helps. Let's dare this. Dare to soar higher, and also look forward to sharing more. And I also, if you have 10 days and $7, I would love for you to take Rise with me, where we talk about some of the lessons and the learning, so that we can be our best version of ourselves, and so that we can be who we decide, and who we discern, and who we hope to be. So I hope this blesses you. Watch your words, so we could all be better. And we can make sure people leave our presence feeling better about who they are and better about their possibility and potential. Blessings. Hope that helps. Hope you have a good day and have a great weekend. Bye.